We're the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and we are fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. My name is Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Taxpayers Federation. I'm here with one of my best friends, Franco Terrazzano. Franco is the Federal Director of the CTF. We have him stationed in Mordor. You poor dear. Okay, he's in Ottawa, folks. In a second, we're going to get to Ontario Premier Doug Ford and him being a drama queen, dumping Crown Royal out on the ground. So we get a clip that you have to see. But first, am I hearing this right? Did you come on this show and start talking about Prime Minister Mark Carney talking about the A word? What's going on here?
Yeah, Carney said the A word. Now, he said it in French. And all the viewers and listeners right now are probably like, what's the A word? Well, the A word is austerity, right? And look,
that A word. Okay.
Yeah, look. First of all, more government austerity means more prosperity for Canadians. Okay, yeah. Guess what? After years of the government engorging itself with your tax dollars, taking more and more money from your wallet, yeah, the government does need to be put on a diet. We do need to see some government austerity because Canadians are tapped out. Now, look, so Mr. Carney had a press conference. He had this cabinet meeting. And this is what he told reporters. It was in French, so we can't play the clip, but I'm just going to read to you what he told reporters, okay? Carney asked about the budget. He said, it's an austerity and investment budget at the same time. And that's possible if we are disciplined. That's what Carney said, okay? Look, Carney went on to say, too, that the rate of increase of federal government spending in the last decade was over 7% year over year. That's faster than the rate of growth of our economy. So, okay, now it's Franco again speaking. I'm back to speaking. Couple things stick out to me at first. Number one, government investment is just government spending, right? They like to put a little ribbon on it. They like to make it sound like it's this special kind of thing, but it's just government spending. Number two, at least Carney's acknowledging what 40 million other Canadians already know, that the federal government, Ottawa, has a spending problem, okay? And we also know that the federal budget is going to be tabled in October. Well, taxpayers have an easy pass-fail grade for the Carney government. Look, if the Carney government's first budget spends $1 more than what Trudeau spent last year, it's a failure. It's a big fat F. Okay, the only way to get a passing grade from taxpayers is that big total spending number where Trudeau spent $540 billion last year. That has to go down. Okay, not down in some areas of the budget, up other areas of budget. No. That has to go down.
What I loved about that whole thing is that you translated two languages there. You were going off the French translation and the government newspeak bullcrap, euphemism translation, which is great. Now, I wanted to be really clear here. When Carney talks about the operating budget versus the capital budget or investment versus spending, can you just be crystal clear here? Isn't that all just the same thing?
Well, no, I actually, excuse me. No, I can't be clear because nobody really knows exactly what Carney's talking about just yet, right? Look, here's the problem with what Carney's trying to do, this accounting trickery, right? Is that by separating out the budget into operating and capital budgets, well, the problem is that politicians can just change certain types of spending and then call it capital spending or investment spending, right? Like the federal government already has a long-standing practice of putting its budgets together. There is no economic reason to split out its budgets into operating spending and capital spending, right? The problem there for taxpayers, it just makes everything more confusing. It makes everything less transparent, right? So if Carney balances the operating budget, he can, we did such a good job. We balanced the operating budget, but the debt will still go up. That's not a balanced budget, right? If the government's borrowing increases, if the debt goes up, that is not a balanced budget, plain and simple. I mean, look, technically the government can give a bunch of money to a corporation, corporate welfare, and it could just say it's making an investment. But all it's doing is taking more money from Canadian taxpayers and giving buckets of cash to a corporation, right? That's not really an investment. That's a big old fat waste of money.
We're going to get to corporate welfare in a second here in the form of his car ban, right? We've got a new car ban going on here. It's Carney deciding to eventually ban the sale of normal gasoline and diesel powered vehicles, new ones. And so those restrictions start kicking in a few months. We've had another company say that they're not going to make a delivery on their batteries. So we're going to get to that in a second. But I just wanted to stay with Ottawa for another minute here, Franco. What's the mood like right now with the Parliamentary Press Gallery? They're just across the street from you there. They're up on Parliament Hill. They're on Queen Street. They're up and down Sparks. Is the buzzword of austerity like running through their veins again?
Well, look, I think everyone who is, I think everyone is kind of in the wait and see mode, right? Because like, what's the old saying, right? Fool me once, shame on you. But like, fool me, 29 times in a row, shame on me. And the problem is that, we've heard, especially in recent years, about these spending reviews, right? Like, I'm old enough to remember the so-called spending review in budget 2023. Right? Where Freeland, who was the finance minister at the time, said that she was going to find $15 billion in savings over 5 years. But then the next year, increased spending by $25 billion and plan to increase spending by billions of dollars more every other single year. So like, pro tip, when you increase spending by billions of dollars every single year, you're saving money wrong, right? So like, we've heard this before, and now we're kind of in this situation of like, I'll believe it when I see it. But look, the federal government does have to cut spending because the elephant in the room is the debt interest charges, right? So on the one hand, the government is more than $1 trillion in debt. And then on the other hand, those interest on that debt is costing taxpayers big time, right? More than $1 billion a week is what the debt interest charges are costing taxpayers, right? What's $1 billion? Well, that's the cost of building a brand new hospital. So every single week, right? So essentially, we're losing out on a hospital every week because that money is being used to pay interest charges on the debt. Or think about it this way, right? Every dollar that you paid in federal sales taxes last year went to pay interest on the debt. Okay, so let that sink in. What could we do if there was no government debt? Well, you could essentially double healthcare transfers to the provinces, or you could completely eliminate the federal sales tax. So the government does have to cut spending. This debt problem is becoming too big to ignore. But, what are we going to see in October's budget? Anyone's guess at this point.
I wanted to stay on the debt interest thing because it's super important, and those examples you gave were outstanding. I was on Niagara Talk Radio earlier this week, and the gentleman who is the host clearly loves the armed forces, and he was reading out this very involved story, which I'm bringing up for a reason, and that is the Canadian Armed Forces who are at Latvia, okay? They're stationed there right now. They participated in an exercise with our NATO allies, and that's something that all the different NATO countries do, and it's basically practice. More than 100, apparently, of our troops had to sit out because their equipment was so crappy that they couldn't make it work. Why? Because their supply lines were all screwed up. They couldn't get the parts. They couldn't get all this stuff. My point here is that exactly what Franco just said. We're spending more than $50 billion with a B per year
more than
on
50
this thing.
billion.
Okay,
on
guys.
Interest.
Okay, guys, here's, I know a lot of our viewers who are watching this probably support the armed forces. We know that you do. If we want Canada to be a big player in NATO and get more respect with the military, how on earth are we supposed to do that if we are bleeding cash like this in debt interest payments? Picture $1 billion a week. The way I like to describe it is this. What Franco said is true. It takes about $1 billion to build a new hospital. So imagine every Saturday night we all gather around and instead of watching hockey, we burn down a new hospital. That's what we're wasting on debt interest payments, which is why when I hear this whole media buzz of, it's austerity, but also investment, it annoys me because the media quite often will just go this deep. They're like a millimeter deep too often. And the buzzword austerity will run through and then we won't get it. Because it's hauled out as this weird boogeyman, and then all of the departments freak out, and then they actually pull back, and they wind up spending money anyway. I wanted to get to the point of departments, because you've done a great job of pointing out how much we need to cut the bureaucracy, and it was one of your 3 main points you were making earlier today on what Carney needs to do to rein in spending.
Yeah, look, first of all, after the federal government has been blowing money for a decade plus so outrageously, look, finding savings in every area of the budget should be like finding water in the ocean. Let's get so real, folks. But you know what? Let's just put the training wheels on. Let's just give the government 3 things that they have to cut. Okay, let's put the training wheels on. Right? We're not, is it Lance Armstrong? We're not Lance Armstrong just yet. Am I saying the right, is he the biker?
You are, yeah.
Yeah.
France, cyclist.
Yeah. We're not there yet.
You.
So let's just put on some training wheels. I'm cultured. Okay. So here's 3 things the Carney government has to cut in the budget. Ready? Politician pay, the bloated bureaucracy, and corporate welfare. Okay. Let's get into all 3 of them. All right. Politician pay. Members of parliament have been giving themselves a pay raise every single year on April 1. Okay, a backbench member of parliament, along with collecting dust, is now collecting a salary that's just shy of $210,000. Yes, the clapping seals, not the ministers. All right, the backbenchers are making just shy of 210 grand a year. A minister, just shy of $310,000. The prime minister's salary, the right honorable, just shy of 420,000 bucks. But hold on a second, right? This is not just about leadership. It is, that's important, but it's not just about that. Okay, number 1, for any politician to sell cuts to the bureaucracy, they have to tighten their own belts first. Okay, but number 2, the bureaucracy continuously points to the MP pay raises that they give themselves every year as a reason why the bureaucracy should take more money from taxpayers. Now let's head into the bureaucracy, right?
They use this as an excuse. Yeah.
They do. They say, look, you guys are giving yourselves more pay. We should get more pay from taxpayers. Okay. The second thing that we have to cut, and this is a bigger thing, is the bureaucracy, right? The federal government added 99,000 extra paper pushers since 2016. The government ballooned the cost of the bureaucracy 77% since 2016. Gross. Barf. Yuck. Okay. Now, look, if the bureaucracy had just grown in line with population over the last decade, taxpayers would save $7 billion a year. Now, the last
$7 billion. Just a sec.
billion.
We need to really nail that down because what you just finished saying about debt interest, all that stuff, $7 billion a year if they had just kept in line with population growth.
That's it. $7 billion a year. There'd be 60,000 fewer federal paper pushers, and taxpayers would save about $7 billion plus a year.
Brutal.
Okay. The third thing, Chris, and this will segue into our next conversation, is end corporate welfare. Stop the reverse Robin Hood, where you take more money from Canadians who are just doing their best to make ends meet, and then you give it to corporations. Look, I am a true believer in free market capitalism. Right? I really am. I love the business community. Okay. What they do, the risks that entrepreneurs take to create jobs and to move society forward can never be overstated. It really can't. But what I hate is corporate welfare, right? When the government takes money from people and then gives it to select government approved businesses. Okay. When these bureaucrats run around trying to play investment banker with your tax dollars. Well, corporate welfare costs from the federal government alone. Federal corporate welfare costs $11 billion a year. Okay. That is the cost, Chris, to your family of 4 of more than $1,100 a year.
Per family?
Per family of 4. The federal corporate welfare costs the Canadian family of 4 more than $1,100 a year.
Okay. And for folks who are new to this realm, okay, thank you so much for watching and listening. Make sure you like and subscribe this video and share it with your friends and family who need a good dose of red pills, okay? So share this around. Second, for folks who aren't familiar with the term corporate welfare, and that might sound a little bit, oh, aren't you being kind of mean? No. This term was coined by Stephen Lewis, who's like a legendary lefty here in Canada, okay? And what Franco is saying here is bang on. Can you describe a little bit of what corporate welfare is? You do it so well when you talk about, what is it, government playing investment banker with your money, picking winners and losers, and how that skews the market?
Yeah, okay, so first, look, the government does have to worry about growing the economy, but there's a right way and there's a wrong way of doing it. The right way is cut taxes and cut red tape. Okay, that's the right way. Lower taxes so that every entrepreneur in the market who has their own skin in the game can succeed relative to the product that they're offering consumers, right? You're essentially allowing consumers to choose which entrepreneurs should be successful and which should not. Corporate welfare is something completely different, right? Where the government takes your tax dollars, hikes your taxes, and then picks what company should be given your money. That is corporate welfare. That is so detached from real economic incentives. That's just political incentives, right? Where should I hold this press conference to say we're creating thousands of jobs? But at best, corporate welfare is a shell game where governments take money out of the economy and they redistribute it to the political rent-seeking entrepreneurs, right? This corporate welfare. And I think the best argument or thing to show about corporate welfare is all the corporate welfare going out to electric vehicle battery plants, right?
Yeah.
Where the federal government put taxpayers on the hook for about $30 billion to multinational corporations like Honda, Volkswagen, Stellantis, Northvolt, so that they can build battery factories, right? About $30 billion, right? That is corporate welfare. What the free market capitalism is create a good playing field, low taxes, no unnecessary red tape, and then allow entrepreneurs to take advantage of the market, right? To provide consumers with goods they actually want to pay for themselves.
That's a huge thing. And you mentioned Northvolt in that list of things. And again, for folks who don't realize, very soon, talk about skewing the market. Like in 4 months' time, 5 months' time, the federal government's restrictions on the sale of new gasoline and diesel powered vehicles kick in. Okay, car dealerships from across the country are going to be having to deal with this stuff of having a bunch of stock sitting around that isn't moving. Okay, it isn't getting sold, but they've got this mandate, this requirement from the feds of no, 20% of your new vehicle sales has got to be battery powered cars. Even though once they removed the tax credit, so actually allowed what I would argue is the natural demand for the sale to float, it went down to around 8%. 9% of people were naturally purchasing, I would argue, a battery-powered vehicle without the big government incentives. Once those incentives went away, boom, it went down to 8 or 9%. Now they're going to crank that up to 20 artificially, which brings us to Northvolt. What exactly is happening there? Is that a Quebec company? Did we give them federal money? Are Quebec taxpayers getting screwed more?
Yeah, so Northvolt was essentially going to build a battery plant or project in Quebec, right?
Okay.
And then the Quebec government and the federal government both announced a whole bunch of corporate welfare, a whole bunch, right? The Quebec government announced about $2 billion of corporate welfare to Northvolt. The federal government announced about $4 billion. Now, what is going on is that we just learned that the Quebec government is pulling out. They've already spent some money. But they're not going to spend any more, and they're even going to try to recoup some of taxpayers' money that it already spent. Okay, so Quebec is essentially, after dumping some money in, they're pulling out. Now, we haven't heard anything from the federal government on this yet. And remember, the federal government announced about $4 billion in subsidies for Northvolt's battery project, right? EV battery project. So we haven't heard anything from the federal government. So right now, it's very important for people to take action, contact your member of parliament, and number one, if Quebec doesn't think this is a good deal and this project is going forward in Quebec, then surely taxpayers in other parts of the province should not be on the hook for this risky type of corporate welfare. I mean, come on. And also, we're hearing some of these politicians talk about the fact that they need to find savings in the budget. Well, the first place is to pull out of this risky corporate welfare deal, right? Save taxpayers billions of dollars and end this corporate welfare.
They could do that while getting rid of their mandate altogether. They should just, frankly, take this whole thing, ball it up, and throw it in the garbage. You and I were talking earlier about something that happened, I think it was during the election, but it feels like a blizzard and a long time ago, where people who were making decisions, to put it nicely in Ottawa, were clearly listening to what you and our legal counsel, Devin Drover, were explaining to them about how to get rid of the carbon tax. Because they did it in exactly that way, which is good. So I'm just going to give a free bit of advice here, put on some comms hats here. Carney has room here.
He does.
Carney has got room to come in to the House of Commons. He's the new guy, clean slate. All he needs to do here, Franco, is to say, you know what? That was the last guy's plan.
Exactly. That's all he has to do, right? Is look, this was a Trudeau era policy. Look, I know a lot of the Liberal MPs, a lot of Carney's own cabinet ministers are from the previous Trudeau administration. I get it, right? But we're just talking political communications right now, folks. We're not talking reality. But all Carney has to do, if he feels pressure from thousands of tax fighters like you, all he has to do is look, This was a policy that was implemented by the previous government. You know, things have changed now. We're dealing with tariffs, yada, yada, yada. That's all Carney has to do. The key, though, is for Canadian Taxpayers Federation supporters to put pressure on the government right now to end this corporate welfare deal. And look, there is the wiggle room there for him to pull the plug on this EV corporate welfare.
And he can, because the numbers are stacked against him. I don't need to tell you that Carney's got his PhD in economics. I'm still impressed that you knew who Lance Armstrong was. I didn't know Lance Armstrong was into Austrian economics along there with you, Franco. Okay, so Carney is big on the math thing, okay? The last guy clearly was not, all right? Carney's got so much political capital right now. He's got a lot of room. The honeymoon period, as they call it, which I think is kind of gross. So he's got all this room. He can walk in there and say, you know what? That was the last guy. The odds are stacked against us. He can use the tariffs issue here. He can say, in order to get a new deal with U.S. President Donald Trump, we've got to, throw this thing in the dumpster. Because I will point this out from a business perspective. Canada's auto industry is America's auto industry. It's the same industry. It just straddles the border. I think I was reading in one case, one car part can cross that Detroit-Windsor border like 8 times before it's installed in a vehicle. So the very idea that Trump has said, you know what, take all this battery-powered car mandate stuff and toss it. I'm not doing any of that. He scrapped the entire Biden administration's plan. The fact that they're 10 times bigger than us just in population. They're a huge market force. And we're still pretending that we're going to keep going this with electric vehicles when we don't have the energy, we don't have the electricity to charge them, and we do not have the money to build the electricity. Like, all of the math is against it. Carney has a golden opportunity to be the smart kid in the room, grab his pocket protector, and draw a line through this thing, right?
Yeah, well, I think all of it's there. Look, the only thing that Carney needs now is the political will to end all this kind of stuff, right? And let's just go back to this most fundamental point. Look, if you like electric vehicles, that's awesome. Sweet. Pay for yourself. But it shouldn't be taxpayers and the government forcing taxpayers to spend tons of money that Canadian taxpayers don't have and the government doesn't have, right? The government's also broke. And the government also shouldn't be mandating what type of vehicle that you have to buy. Like, look, a lot of these politicians in Ottawa don't know what it's like to be living in like Lethbridge or Red Deer or Regina, right? A lot of these politicians have no idea the realities on the ground, but also to the point, like, this is going to be hugely expensive, right? The one thing that you have to ask yourself when you hear about this ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles is like, how much is my power and tax bill going to go up? And the answer is going to be staggering. There's a reason that none of these politicians want to talk about the cost, because it is going to be astronomical. Now, with that being said, Chris, you want to have a little bit of fun?
Yes.
Want to go on a little bit of rant? Why don't you share the video that you've been wanting to talk about and then just go on a little bit of a rant?
Okay, I just need to tee it up quickly here. This is Ontario Premier Doug Ford responding to the latest tiff he's having with Trump. Play tape.
The people that work at Crown Royal. So you know something, a message to the CEO in France, you hurt my people, I'm going to hurt you. You're going to feel the pain in February when these people don't have a paycheck. And I'm going to stand up for the people of Ontario. And I encourage all of Canadians, all of Ontarians, stand up for the people. Because you don't know if you're next. But the thing that ticks me off, I get it. I get that companies move back and forth. But what I don't get, when you're someone's largest customer in North America, you're going after the largest customer. You know something? I always say smart people aren't too smart, and you guys are about as dumb as a bag of hammers for doing this. So, you know something? I found a bottle, and I don't even drink, of Crown Royal, right? I see that Crown Royal. I saw it at home. So this is what I think about Crown Royal. That's what they could do. And I think everyone else should do the same thing. Start supporting companies that make whiskey here by Ontario people. That's what we need to do, is support each other.
Okay, so a few things here. Number one, Crown Royal is made in Gimli, Manitoba. Last I checked, Manitoba is not in the United States. Donald Trump is not president of Manitoba. So, little pro tip there for Premier Ford. Second, this is so much distraction theater, Franco. Now, far be it from me to say that people shouldn't dress up in costumes or do stunts to get attention. I get that. We literally hand out golden pig statues, okay? But there's a time and a place. And I think this whole shtick with his ball cap of let's just fight Trump and do dumb stuff in front of video in order to distract the media is getting old. And the reason why I'm saying it's getting old is twofold. One, he already won the provincial election. So that little stunt is over. So he's already got that one. That moose head is up on the wall. Okay, it's stuffed. Second, Ontario taxpayers are getting kicked in the face, okay? Doug Ford's budget management is awful. Awful. I don't know if you remember, but it was legit. It was like 10 days ago or so. I phoned you because I was checking some of our earlier stats on Doug Ford's budgeting. And we've got a great new Ontario director. His name's Noah Jarvis. He's a total rock star, so folks are going to see a lot more of him. But I was going back through some of the readings, and Ontario is in so much provincial debt, it is costing Ontario taxpayers $300 million in interest a week. A week. That's when I phoned you, because I'm like, okay, like, am I missing a zero here? But no, that's how much it's costing in interest. And to put it this way, a really nice house in Ontario, on average, is about $860,000-ish. Okay, that's your average house. So we're including, the outliers of, Thunder Bay and downtown Toronto. So that's the average, $860,000. For the amount of money that Ontarians are paying in interest per week, you could buy like 360 something houses a week. A week. So we put out this meme of Ford, and I would encourage everybody use this meme, man, where he's sitting there theatrically dumping out the Crown Royal poorly. I will point out he didn't do it very well. There's a lot of glug going on there. And we made it as red ink and him flooding neighborhoods full of red ink, because that, frankly, is what he needs to be focusing on. But because his budget is such a dumpster fire, he trots out and does this stuff because it's distracting the media. Am I off base? Am I being too hard? Okay.
No, it's a lot easier to, have a nice little press conference than it is actually roll up your sleeves and do the work that taxpayers are paying you for, right? Borrowing tons of money. Like, come on, right? Like, you cut income taxes, cut the corporate welfare, and finally balance a budget. Like, that's what taxpayers want, not these like silly theatrics.
I do honestly need to ask you, because I haven't been keeping up with the latest between what he and Carney is saying. Has Ford now come out on this whole EV thing? Has he said stop the mandate but keep the pork rolling? Is that the latest he said? So well, I don't, what is he doing with that?
Yeah, like if I'm not mistaken, he's been against the EV mandate stuff. And by that, I mean the ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles. But look, Ford is just as guilty as any politician in Canada about the EV corporate welfare, right? Like, he's also putting taxpayers in Ontario on the hook for a lot of these different battery plants that are going on in southwestern Ontario. So Ford is just as guilty as any other politician wearing any other color of jersey in Canada on the corporate welfare.
And I think also, I don't think he's stood up publicly to Carney on the industrial carbon tax yet, right?
No. So you have, look, so yeah, that's exactly the case, right? Unfortunately, like you remember when Ford comes into office and he's railing against the carbon tax. I mean, like last year, he said something to the effect of like the carbon tax is the worst tax they could ever put on people. Right? Yeah. Like that was a year ago. That was 2024. But look, you have other premiers who are absolutely taking the lead on the hidden carbon tax on Canadian business, the one that Carney wants to keep hammering our businesses with, right? You have Scott Moe, who said, no, there is going to be no carbon tax here in Saskatchewan, including that hidden industrial carbon tax. Your premier, Danielle Smith, out there in Alberta, Chris, she's also kind of, in the fight as well, right? Where she's going to keep the current industrial carbon tax. Boo. But at least Premier Smith's like, no, we're not increasing it anymore. We're not increasing it. It's staying where it is. The government could go, pound rocks or pound sand or whatever. So, Mo is definitely fighting it out there in Saskatchewan. Premier Smith is kind of fighting back a little bit on it, not going nearly far enough, but at least they're fighting somewhat. Whereas, in Ontario, Ford is, his silence on the industrial carbon tax is deafening.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to end on this and credit where it's due. Pierre Poilievre, Conservative Party leader, is sticking in this fight. So credit to him completely. If I can talk to some of the kids who are new influencers out there in the world, in the verse, as they say, the carbon tax fight is fundamental to having smaller, more accountable government that isn't controlling your life. Because if the government is making it more expensive for you to buy food, move around, or heat your home, they've got you by the neck. Okay? So if you guys want, smaller government, if you don't want like globalists, getting involved and up in your grill, you have to stay in the carbon tax fight. So it is really good that Pierre Poilievre came out swinging and said, yeah, we're still fighting this. So he's come out against the industrial carbon tax and the second carbon tax, often called the low fuel standard. Wanted to give a shout out because I know he was getting flack about that online. For the kids who are new to this fight, this is the original. This is the OG bit of government control. You have to keep fighting carbon taxes. Franco, thank you so much. Is there anything I haven't asked you about?
Nah, take us home, Chris.
All right, folks. What Franco just said there is dead true. Okay? Right now is the time to push Carney to scrap this corporate welfare. I promise you, they're all putting their heads together. They're all having little cabinet retreats right now. What are we going to do when the House comes back? Send an email. Send an email, pick up the phone, make a phone call to your member of parliament, tell them to scrap this corporate welfare and to get rid of the ban on the sale of new gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles. Head over to taxpayer.com for more info.
Hey everyone, Franco Terrazzano here. I just want to give you a quick update on the government's ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. So me and Chris talked about it a little bit during the show, but after we were done recording, Prime Minister Mark Carney actually held an announcement, right? So you'll remember that the government is imposing this ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. So that ban is scheduled or was scheduled to start to kick in 2026, where 20% of all new vehicles sold in Canada were to be electric. But in Carney's announcement that he just made, he's going to delay that ban by a year and hold a 60-day review. So to make it very clear, Carney has not ended the government's ban. He's just delaying it by a year and doing a review. So folks, we have to keep up the pressure right now, right? Because a delay on this horrendous policy is not good enough. We have to force Carney to completely scrap the government's ban. And here's how you can fight back, right? Head over to taxpayer.com, sign the petition, no ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles, right, folks? We got to keep fighting to push back and force the Carney government to end the ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. All right, folks, just want to give you a little update. We'll talk to you next time.